For more content like this, log on to gibbopresents.com.
It's Gibbo, and right now I'm joined by a music industry professional with a vast amount of experience in a number of areas, including management, production, and engineering. Here to discuss his latest production, the After Glow Riddim, and his career accomplishments, it is Jeremy Harding. How are you?
Hey Gibbo, how are you? Glad to be on the show. I'm a big fan of the show.
My pleasure, and great to hear that. Let's keep things current to start with the Afterglow Riddim. What gave you the idea for this production? What was your starting point?
Well, the Afterglow Riddim, funnily enough, it was a series of tracks which I've been making recently that kind of had like a little influence from the sort of, Afrobeat kind of bounce. And I wasn't really thinking of putting together a project because I had not done a project in so long. And after reaching out to a few different artists and realizing that I actually had a couple of guys that were very eager to work with me, who had never worked with me in the past, people like Bugle and people like Massacre, for example, I made the reach out, and they were very excited to do a project. So I said, okay, let me try and put this thing together. So it was very free form, nothing was too planned. I didn't really give the artists too much instructions. I just kind of let them just do what they want to do. And I ended up with a nice project with, some good young talent on there and a couple of veterans. You know what I'm saying? And hopefully it will be well received.
When was the last time you released a rhythm?
Wow, the last project I did was probably a one-drop rhythm called Deep Cover. I did one called City Life and Deep Cover back-to-back. And that was with co-produced by myself and Nigel Staff from Rough Cut Band. That was probably... Oh man, that's maybe about 5 years ago. What are we, 2016, 2010, 11, somewhere around there? Time's flying. Yeah, so it's been a while.
Do you have a pattern or a process that you follow when it comes to building a rhythm?
It depends. Sometimes this music making thing is two sides, right? It's a craft, first of all, and there's also artistic side. So by saying it's a craft, what that means is that you have the ability to go in and craft music without necessarily being inspired. You can sort of put it together, piece it together. You know what kind of drum patterns work. You know where your sounds are in the computer. You know what key signatures you like to work in, depending on the kind of artist. So it's a lot of craft. And then the art side of it is sort of where the consciousness of thought just kind of takes over and you don't really think about it too much. So you're working in a combination of both spaces. I've done rhythms in the past where I literally went to sleep, woke up, and I heard the whole rhythm in my head. Like Sim Simmer from how long ago. That was one of those, woke up, heard the bass line, heard the lead line, ran the studio, let me do it. But then other rhythms like, Liquid Riddim and a lot of the stuff I did with Sean Paul, for example, a lot of that stuff we just were building in the studio that just kind of came, as we're going along. So it all depends. The process is different.
The Afterglow Riddim features Shaggy and GC, Massacre, Bugle, Christopher Martin, Jamil, and Beanie Man. How do you decide which artists to feature on a rhythm?
Usually you kind of have an idea in your head of the sound of the kind of artist that you want. Most producers, I think, will kind of know that certain artists tend to like certain beat patterns or maybe certain kind of moods or certain, keys that you're in will kind of remind you of certain acts. But then still, you kind of cast a wide net because you could have your, special list of 5 or 6 people that you really want to get. And, 3 of them are on tour in Europe for 2 months. You know what I'm saying? So you kind of have to pick a wider scope, kind of go out there and see who's available and kind of make your decisions from there.
Is 5 or 6 artists the right amount to voice on a rhythm? Is there a right number?
I don't know if there's really a right number anymore. I mean, nowadays, I see a lot of people do about 5, 6. I think it really depends. Back in the 90s and the 2000s, we were doing 10 people, 12. I mean, if something was really successful, you'd go and do a part 2, and do a whole other second album. As far as I get it, the history of it, actually, a lot of it comes from when you're using 24-track tape back in the day. You would fill up half the tape or maybe 10, 11 tracks with instruments. And then you'd have 10 or 11 tracks left on the tape. So the producers, in order to maximize their earnings from one rhythm, would end up recording a whole bunch of artists on one rhythm. So it was really about using up the 24 track tape, why we got this whole concept of juggling with lots of artists on a rhythm. You understand what I'm saying? Nowadays, of course, we're digital, so it doesn't matter. We could do 100 songs if we want. You know what I mean? It doesn't make a difference. But I think a lot of that culture of the tape, the idea of like filling up the tape, still is in our head. Like when we do our project, we're like, nah, we can't just have one song. We gotta have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 songs. You know what I mean? So that still kind of remains with us.
That's really interesting what you said about the tape, because I had noticed, as opposed to say 10, 15 years ago, we tend to get fewer artists on a rhythm these days, but I hadn't known that about filling up the tape. This is the kind of knowledge that I wanted to gain from you.
Yeah, man, filling up the tape was the thing. That's just before my generation. When I came in, it was probably about the advent of digital recording. We just saw early Pro Tools and early digital tape systems like ADAT and Tascam DA88 systems. You know what I mean? So like just on the cusp of transferring over from analog to digital, I think that's where, you know, that the intersection of how you made records is my starting point right there.
You posted a photo not too long ago of you recording background vocals for Massacre, or a Massacre track. Were they for Down for Life? And is this something that you do often?
Yeah, it actually was. It was for Down for Life, and I do often do a lot of background vocals on tracks. I'm not the greatest singer, but you know, I went to music school as a kid, and I played guitar, and you know, sang in the choir and things like that. So sometimes, depending on what you're trying to do, you know, you're hearing background vocals, you're hearing little things that need to be added, you're hearing, you know, all kinds of production tips and ideas, and it's like 3 a.m. and you don't have anybody to call. You can't wait on a call the background vocal guy to come do a session or whatever. So you just, you know, you hack it out yourself. And you know, the beauty of us being you know, the digital producers is that we can sit alone and I can sing it 100 times and just choose the one take that's really good, and that's the take you all guys will get to hear. You know what I mean?
I have to mention another photo you posted recently of your studio in 1996. For those who haven't seen this photo, can you describe the studio and the equipment you were using, and also list a few of the hits that were recorded there?
Oh wow, so I came upon that photo looking through an old chest of actual photos, like, because this was pre-smartphone, right? So I didn't have it digital. I found actual photos, so I scanned that and put that up. That was a small studio, which I had just come back from Toronto. I lived in Montreal and Toronto, and I had a radio show on CKUT 90.3 FM, McGill Radio, big up to CKUT. And I was doing production and playing lots of music on the radio, recording artists, playing them on the radio. When I came back to Jamaica, I brought some of the production equipment which I had, which was mostly digital gear, and decided I want to set up a small studio environment. Now, back in this time, the big studios still ruled, so it was still all about big tape machines. It was all about, you know, King Jammies and Mixing Lab and Penthouse and, you know, all the classic great studios that we all know about. So I had this little place where I was doing jingles. So I had an Akai S950 rack sampler, I had a PV keyboard, actually, and I had an Atari 1040 SD computer. So there's no Mac at this point, you know what I mean? And PCs were still not really so much being used for music at all. So it's very early in the development. Yeah, so that was the setup which I had, and I'd gone to a music production school, Trebas Institute in Montreal, and they were all using Atari computers, so I'd learned how to use the software and how to connect stuff by MIDI, and you know, had the drum machine connected by MIDI to the S950, connected to the Atari, running like Master Tracks Pro, all this kind of software. So that was the thing. And then I later invested in one of the first digital audio systems by the same company that makes Pro Tools now, back then, and it was a system called Session 8 by DigiDesign. So it was eight tracks, 1, 5, 7, 8. 8 tracks digital is what you could get out of it. And so yeah, I was sequencing, building tracks in Atari, and dumping stuff into the PC rig with 8 tracks of digital audio. And I had a small mixing board, as I said, 950 rack sampler, a little padded room, didn't know anything about acoustics, but I just knew that the room had to just be soundproof. So we went and we got sponge, and I got an upholstery guy in Jamaica, a guy that does like couches and stuff, basically, to stitch together with material, like, you know, sponge with the upholstery material on it, and we plastered that all over the walls. And we used the mattress sponge as well. on the roofs and stuff, and the room was totally dead, like, bam, clap your hands and like nothing. You know what I mean? But it was a little space, man, like 8 foot by 6. But we made some real nice records out of there, man. We did the whole Sean Paul Stage 1 album, pretty much was done from there. A lot of records on his Dirty Rock album were done there. A lot of records that he did for other people were actually recorded there, the vocals as well. We also did, like Temperature, for example, Sean, that vocals were recorded there. We did a record with Rihanna called Break It Off, that was done there. Beenie Man did Who Am I, Sim Simma, that was done there. Elephant Man, Log On, that was done there. Mr. Vegas, Hands in the Air, that was done there. I mean, all the records from that little time, and it just goes to show, like, I mean, it was a little cramped space, but there was so much energy and so many vibes there. I mean, a lot of artists got their first start as I was getting my first start as a producer, you know what I mean? The living room used to be right beside that little studio, so we'd have the PlayStation going. We were playing FIFA, so you look in the room and you see like Wayne Marshall, Mr. Vegas, Mr. Lexus, Sean, oh man, so many guys at that time that used to come pass through. So we'd be playing FIFA and then like running inside and cutting a dub plate and then going back and then building a rhythm on somebody's voicing and then going outside in the yard. And you know what I mean, we're all kids, man. It was fun. It was a great time to be growing up making music in dancehall in Kingston.
So if you recorded Temperature there, the studio must have been in operation to at least around 2004-05?
Yeah. It went all the way up until there, until moved to a new facility. I got married actually, so I had to get a real house and couldn't do the FIFA stuff with the lads anymore. So had to kind of grow up. So we left that place and we built another studio at another location. And some good records were done there too. I mixed Movado, Delilah at that studio. I did a lot of work there with Stephen the Genius McGregor. We did work with Mattis Yahoo at that studio. We did work with who else? Dallas Austin. Who else came? Diplo was at that studio. Protege's last album, Ancient Future, was all recorded at that studio as well.
How have advances in technology impacted the way in which you work, and is everything easier now, or have some things become more complicated?
Funnily enough, I think, well, the technology part makes the recording process easier, but I think it makes the social interaction harder, which is also a very important key, in my opinion, to making great records. So the technology is there, everything's easy. We can just build a beat, we can email it to someone, they can send back vocals, it's convenient. I can make multiple copies, I can back it up in the cloud. I can do remixes and can pull back up mixes very easily if I need to. For disc jockeys, we can just email the records. I mean, when we didn't have email, I used to have to press 45s and like go to FedEx and like write on the box like David Rodigan. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, Daddy Ernie, like, you know, Bobby Condors, whatever, and, you know, ship it off. And me and all the producers, that's how we had to get music, send out music. So the technology makes those things so much easier. But then the social interaction tends to disappear as well, which is difficult because I grew up as learning to be a producer as somebody who not just mans the equipment and the board and whatever, but actually interacts with people in the studio. That's the whole point, right? Guiding the artist, telling them what you want. Well, I don't really work with other musicians, but if you were, you'd be working with musicians, telling them what you want. And the technology tends to remove that social interaction. So it does get a little bit cold, sterile maybe, you know? You make beats, you email them to people. People do their own thing, they send back the tracks, you know what I mean? And you kind of hope for the best. You click the email and you press play and you're like, okay, it's pretty good. And sometimes you're like, not so good. So that part definitely doesn't make things easier.
You, along with Christopher Edmonds, aka Red Selector, have produced house and techno music under the name Echomatic, and before that, I believe also as Stereo Massive. What led you to going down this route, and was it something that you had wanted to do for a long time?
You know, funny enough, when I met Chris and we got to talking and becoming friends, we both realized two of us have a DJ background. So before I came back to Jamaica, when I was living in Montreal and in Toronto, I used to DJ. I had a radio show, as I told you before, and I used to play at nightclubs. So this would have been like late 80s, 89, 1991. Just about that kind of time when house music was just starting to get commercialized. You know what I mean? So the house clubs are like, you know, really popping, especially in Montreal. I mean, fantastic city and had a great scene. So I was doing DJing like hip hop and reggae and stuff like that as well, but I was also DJing on the main strip and playing a lot of house music. You know what I mean? So I really learned like DJing skills playing like, you know, stuff from like Warp Records and Strictly Rhythm and Ministry of Sound and that whole era. So when I spoke to Chris, when I met Chris and we started talking about DJing, I'd known him, you know, from a few years before, and he also had a lot of experience playing a lot of house music as well. You know, he went to Stanford and he was DJing out there, and he was in Miami a lot. And so what a mutual interest in house music, actually, just funnily enough, had nothing to do with reggae or Jamaica or the EDM craze or, you know what I mean, trying to, you know, cash in on anything. And we started doing some local gigs around town at some of the clubs that would, you know, had like a small terrace or a small room, you know, where the, you know, kids want to listen to house, and we'd play house and we'd play, you know, some techno, mostly house, deep house, stuff like that. And, you know, we just eventually said, hey, let's just try and make, you know, some records and put them out. I mean, Chris has a digital distribution company, which is what he does. So he already had the distribution chain set up for us to be able to put stuff on Beatport, Amazon, iTunes, whatever. It was dead easy for him. You know what I mean? And then I had the studio, and we both had the knowledge for DJing. So we did a few projects, I mean, in between our real day jobs in music, you know what I mean? So Stereo Massive was one project at one time, and then we kind of, you know, laid off a bit, went in different directions. We came back. You know, we did the Ecomatic project, put out a couple of things as well here or there. So, I mean, you know, it's a lot of fun, and it's just one of those things that, you know, you always think people like, oh, well, he's a reggae guy, so he can't possibly know about that kind of music. Or, I mean, I've never seen it that way. We've grown up listening to all kinds of, I play guitar. I listen to Hendrix, Van Halen, Malmsteen, you know what I'm saying, Eunice Satriani, Steve Vai. So I have that side of me musically. I've also had a DJing career and a background, you know what I mean, in playing house music. And, you know, and of course, everybody knows me as, you know, the reggae music, dancehall music producer. So it's all music, Gibbo. It's just all music to me.
And in addition to all of that, these days you are also a lecturer at, I believe, UWI Mona. How did this opportunity materialize, and what class or classes do you teach?
Wow, so that's a strange one, because I've actually done, over the years, a few speaking engagements at different tertiary educational institutions. So I've actually spoken at like Miami-Dade College, the same Trebas Institute in Toronto. I've spoken there. I've spoken at our local music school, Edna Manley, and I've, you know, been a guest speaker as well at World Intellectual Property Office conventions. And people always, they look for people who have practical experience in the industry, I guess, to come and talk to, you know, students and people about, you know, what they've been doing. So in actually doing that, I've been getting so much exposure and getting kind of a feel for, like, you know, lecturing and being in classes and talking to kids. And I did a Red Bull as well in Seattle, and also Red Bull in Jamaica. And at one of the Red Bull conferences, I was approached by Dr. Stanley Naya, Sonia Stanley Naya, who is head of Cultural Studies Department at University of the West Indies. And she said to me, listen, you know, I've heard you speak. I kind of know your resume and what you've been doing. I think you'd make a great candidate, you understand, to come and, you know, maybe even do a PhD program or come and teach at university. So, of course, I was like, whatever. But, you know, I went, did a couple of guest lectures, and she kind of convinced me, nah, give it a shot. And, you know what I mean? And I gave it a shot last year, and I had a lot of fun with it, actually. So I'm actually doing it again this year. And we'll see where it takes me, man. I mean, it always feels good to share knowledge to, you know, up-and-coming kids that want to be involved in the music industry, especially the business industry here in Jamaica. I mean, we got lots of talent. Kids are making beats every day. Everybody's DJing, singing. You know what I mean? We don't have any issue with that. But the music business part here really suffers in our industry. So it feels good to kind of be able to get in on the ground floor with these kids at this level. Teach them, of course, like how the business part of it works, textbook-wise, but also give them a practical understanding of, like, hey, that's what it says in the textbooks. You know, this business of music and all of these great texts we all know about. But in real life, this is actually what happens. And then also there's a perspective of being a Jamaican guy doing reggae music. Like, most of these kids end up being in the reggae music industry and trying to interface with the larger world. That's another perspective as well. So, I mean, the way I see it, bro, like, I get like maybe 30 kids in a class. If I can get even 2 of those kids to turn up to be the next Robert Livingston or the next Specialist or the next Jeremy Harding or whatever, or the next Sharon Burke, Jerome Hamilton, whatever, business person, the next music attorney. You know what I'm saying? They will carry a next generation, and we'll have a whole lot of crap artists to talk about. And, we keep pushing it down the line, 10 years, 15, 20 years. You know what I mean? So we'll keep making a contribution as we go on.
Generally speaking, when it comes to the business sides of the music business, how do Jamaican reggae and dancehall artists and producers stack up to those from other genres? Are there certain areas in which they excel, in which they are ahead of other genres? And are there also certain areas where you feel they could improve?
I think definitely on the touring side, we have a very strong touring infrastructure set up in our reggae music business, in dancehall and reggae. So almost all managers, agents, road managers, touring, I think, is our strongest point on the business side of it, because we spend so much time doing multiple countries throughout the year. We'll do areas in the world that, R&B and hip-hop artists never get to go to, like certain places in Africa or in the Middle East, Dubai, these kind of places, Japan. Of course, we do extensive touring of Europe all the time as well. We have Caribbean touring, Canada, all over the globe. Everybody's always touring. Reggae music and dancehall is, it's truly worldwide. So I think our touring model is something to be envied, most definitely. When you speak to other managers of other artists, they're always shocked to understand like how often, dancehall reggae artists are touring. And when you speak to the artists that go on to shows in clubs that feature hip-hop or R&B artists, and they'll be like, wow, I'm actually getting paid more from the promoter than this guy. I'm actually more popular in the club than that guy, even though he's selling more records than me. You know what I'm saying? In the scheme of things. So I think that's definitely a strong point. I think our weaker points probably have to do with the legal aspects of the business. Contracts, understanding the performing rights societies, registering yourself, to be able to collect royalties, to pay taxes, in the UK, in the US. I think we're weak on that side of it. I think it's sort of, partly like a cultural thing of like, nobody wants to be too committed to anything, so we don't really want to sign a piece of paper. It's all vibes and a handshake and, yeah, man, Gibbo is my brethren, I'll just go do it for him, and me and him can just work, and then we never really sign a piece of paper. You know what I mean? I think that's caused us a lot of problems throughout the years. Just like, the resistance to kind of like getting the legal side of our business intact, learning the legal side of the business. Using, consultants, obviously attorneys, but just understanding that you need to have contracts need to be signed. You know what I'm saying? You need to pay some taxes to some government somewhere in the world at some point, if you want to blow up and get big. So I think these kind of things, I think, are the parts where we really need a lot of help to grow.
Speaking as someone who managed Sean Paul from the early stages of his career until 2011 and who helped him achieve all that he did during this period, what would you say are the keys to achieving the kind of crossover or mainstream success as a Jamaican dancehall artist? Would they be the same now, or with changing times, have what you need to do changed along with that?
I think one of the first things you have to keep realizing is that you're playing to an audience that really does not know much about where you're coming from or what your culture is. They're interested and they're curious, but it's going to take time for them to kind of figure out what you're about. So when you're doing your songwriting, if you're just going to write about, topics which are just, to Jamaica or to the Caribbean culture alone, you're going to alienate a lot of people outside the country. They won't be able to get you. I think that's one of the first things. So the type of music that you're making makes a very big difference. People have this thing in their head about, we're going to make a crossover song, and which is not the approach at all. Nobody who ever set out to make a crossover record actually crossed over with it. The records that crossed over are always homegrown Jamaican records, whether it was Sean Paul with his Give Me the Light and Get Busy and, on the UWI Riddim and this kind of stuff, or if it was, Being with Sim Sim, or if it was Serrani, No Games, or Egyptian, Holy, or any of these records, they were all hits in the Jamaican dancehall circuit. Elephant Man, Baby Sham, all of these guys. Nobody sat out to make a crossover record. But when you kind of look at these records, you realize that they had a lot more kind of universal appeal, and they weren't speaking specifically to something in Jamaica. There's something that, people from all, walks of life could enjoy. So, I mean, I think that's very important for these artists to understand now. And also, the changes and the differences now is that you're in a era of like the internet and access, and everybody has access to everything immediately. I mean, back when we were doing it, we still had to kind of, get on a few planes and go do a few magazine interviews to kind of get the word out. But now everything is there and it's instant. And, we talk about, our culture, and we're spreading the music, and, we're hearing the Jamaican influence in so many records from so many artists from, hip hop and pop and, all over the place. So you see the influence is spreading all over. There are a few people that are getting a little upset, like, oh, we're not getting enough credit for the music. I'm not really too sure exactly what that's supposed to mean. We've spread the music, and it's worldwide, and it's permeated pop culture. You know what I mean? Every time somebody makes a beat with a hip-hop track, they don't have to be like, oh, big up to Brooklyn and Cool Herc and everybody in New York for hip-hop. You know what I mean? So I think it's a little bit disingenuous to think that everybody needs to say, oh, by the way, big up to Jamaicans for giving us dancehall so I could use this beat in my song. It's pop music, man. You know what I mean? So be careful what you wish for. You want to spread the word and get it out there. So now it's all out there. I think the challenge is, however, instead of wasting time kind of trying to bash other people about their usage of dancehall or whether or not it's appropriation of our culture, is to go out there and try and compete. You know what I mean? On the same level. So if you hear Ed Sheeran with a beat and you like, that kind of sounds like dancehall, then you have to realize, like, okay, well, the sound's popular. You know what I mean? So let's capitalize on it then. Let's try and make records that are going to be in line, with those type of records, the topics that they're singing about. That's what people like to hear. You know what I mean? So instead of us making a song about, I don't know, some gal in the dance and or doing this or doing whatever that only Jamaican people and people who love dance understand, maybe some more universal topics. You know what I mean? Like what some of these other guys are doing. I think that's the place that we need to reach. Because it's global now, Gibbo. I mean, you can't stop it now, bro. You can't stop it. Dancehall, 10 years, 5 years from now, you're gonna get dancehall artists and reggae artists from every place, all over the planet. And guess what? Kids aren't gonna be too concerned with like, oh, is he actually from Jamaica or not? They're just gonna know that, the music's good. You know what I'm saying? And we love the vibe, and it's the genre has managed to to hold the test of time.
Are there any Jamaican dancehall artists at the moment who you feel are going down the right path and are on the cusp of achieving this kind of crossover or mainstream success, or they could if they make the right moves in the months and years to come?
I don't know, man. That one's a difficult one to say. I mean, sometimes you see some artists and you kind of think that they do have the potential to do it, but maybe not all of the facets are there. And then behind the scenes too, you need to kind of have all the pieces together. So it's hard to kind of look and just say like, oh yeah, that guy looks promising, you know what I mean? Because, the guys that have crossover in the past were people that you didn't expect it to happen, you know what I'm saying? So it's a little bit tricky right now. I think I'd put my faith definitely in the very young generation coming up. I think they're coming into an era where they're understanding the music business for what it is now and not for what it used to be. So they're not coming in thinking about like, I'm going to sell platinum. And, Sony's going to come and sign me and give me $1 million. They're like, no, they're up on their YouTube game. You understand me? Like, they're like grinding it out online and doing stuff on SoundCloud and making their own releases. You know what I'm saying? They're really, acting with the times and with the technology, and they're really good on social media. You got kids in Jamaica, dancehall artists with like 500,000 followers on Instagram, for example, shockingly. You understand what I'm saying? So the point is, however, that they're embracing those new technologies. So it's hard for to kind of pinpoint any one artist or person, but I'd say definitely put faith in the very new up-and-coming crop. The guys that have been around for the last 10, 15 years, they made a great contribution and they're going strong, but I really believe it's in the youth, the up-and-coming youth cultures where we're going to see the next real transcendent superstars out of Jamaica.
Relating to the power of the internet and social media, it's very much a digital world that we live in today when it comes to music, whether that be sales or streaming. Is there any advice or tips that you would offer to dancehall and reggae artists to make sure that they are making the most out of the opportunities that are out there when it comes to utilizing digital platforms as much as possible?
Okay, two things. First of all, one, they need to understand where it's being monetized. So they need to understand what sound exchange is, for example. They need to understand how Spotify makes money and streaming services. They need to understand how the YouTube channels make money or don't make money. We need to have a realistic management of expectations. In other words, 1 million views on YouTube is nothing, that's peanuts. In the past, 1 million sales, we'd be really excited, we'd be platinum. Understand? But you've got to exaggerate those numbers now and think beyond that. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's very important, to keep our egos in check, manage the expectations, and start counting the numbers a little bit more, so you can understand what real success is in the digital world. So I think that's the first part of it. Publishing is always still very key. Shockingly, there are so many artists out here with young managers who don't have publishing deals, and they think that, you know, just because they're with the ASCAP or BMI or PRS, that, you know, they're fine. And there's a lot of income out there to be collected. And you have a lot of publishers who specialize in reggae and dancehall, or, you know, administration type publishers as well, that can really go out there and collect those works for you all over the place where they play. So it's about, you know, kind of collaborating all the different sources of income, especially in a digital world when you're an independent musician, as most of us are. I think that's the first main point to get about being in a digital space. And I think also they also need to understand that it's a lot about selling an experience, and it's about content. You know what I mean? It's not really about just selling a song. And I think a lot of guys still have this thing in their head that, oh, I'm going to find Jamaica. We have an expression in the studio when a guy gets a hit and we say, oh, we'll find it. We say, yeah, man, him find it. You know what I mean? Gibbo find it. Like, it was, you know, in the atmosphere, and you pulled it down and you found it, and it's the hit. You understand? And we bank too much on trying to find it constantly, where what we really should be doing is worrying about selling our brand. I mean, we've had some artists that have been very successful at selling the brand. You know what I'm saying? I think we need to get more in that line of thinking. Stop pinning hopes on like one particular record. You know what I mean? It's your brand that counts. And even as far as the major labels are concerned, if you're thinking about crossing over, getting this deal, they're not interested in like, okay, you made one hit song. They can just sign a record. They don't need to sign you. They can sign that one record, put it out, put it on Spotify, whatever, and sell a bunch of digital copies, iTunes, and be done with it. But for them to invest in you as an artist, you've got to be coming with a whole story, with a whole package, with a whole, you know, brand behind yourself, what you do, what you represent, what you're doing on social media, you know what I mean, your views on life, and, you know what I'm saying, and music, and, you know what I mean, your whole movement behind you. I mean, people like Chronix have been very successful in this modern time, actually, in doing that. Not necessarily with any one hit record, but with a great brand. You understand what I'm saying? So he's like a good example, I mean, to show you. So I think a lot more artists out here need to start thinking more about, you know, their brand potential, and as I said, easy on the numbers, bro. Like, you know, 1 million on YouTube ain't nothing. You gotta be doing, you know, 50 million, 100 million. You gotta be doing proper numbers to really make an income out of this thing, you know what I mean, to feel like you're getting somewhere.
Having achieved all that you have over the last 20 plus years, what are your goals and aspirations at this point in time? What is left to do on Jeremy Harding's to-do list?
Wow. I mean, you just want to do it again. You just want to keep doing it again over and over and over. I mean, at my heart, I'm a musician. I'm a guitarist, and I love making records. I mean, before the business part, before the artist manager part, even before, you know, this new, you know, educational, you know, educator role, which I'm playing at this point in time. I think that's what drives me. So for me, it's always, Gibbo, every day is like a brand new day. You know what I mean? I approach it like I'm just starting. I sit down and make beats like I'm just learning. You know what I mean? I just taught myself like Fruity Loops FL Studio. Like, you know, a month ago, you know, a program we used to bash and say it wasn't for real producers. You know what I mean? But like, so now between Ableton, Pro Tools, Cubase, Logic, FL Studio, always learning, always doing new things. Of course, you want to inspire people as well, and you want to do a little bit of mentorship and kind of hope that it continues, because, you know what I mean, although you want to do it forever, you really can't do it forever. You understand? But I think the aspirations and the goals remain the same, man. It's always the same challenges out there. Just keep trying to make good music, and just see where that road takes you. You know, maybe even, well, as we speak about, you know, the whole university stuff as well, maybe that's something which is another mountain which I definitely wasn't in my view to climb. You understand? So maybe that's something we can look forward to in the years to come. You know what I'm saying? So maybe have a more, esteemed role in that kind of position, and we'll see how it goes.
Before we finish, is there anything else you'd like to mention, or anyone that you'd like to big up?
No, man, just really want to big up like all the kids that are still doing reggae music and still doing dancehall. Big up all the people that still support it. It's been through, rough times and ups and downs. But, we stick through it because we love it. You know what I mean? Big up to people like yourself. As I said, fanning your show, thanks so much for having me on, and it's great what you're doing, and exposing people to the world, the practitioners of our music in our industry. You know what I'm saying? All the veteran guys still hanging in there as well. My good friends like Birch, Tony Kelly, Nigel Staff, these guys are doing on a daily basis, you know what I mean? And when I feel like quitting the business, the guys like, nah, Jeremy, you can't quit. You know what I'm saying? You're here to do this, man. You got to keep, pressing it on. You know what I'm saying? So big up definitely to those guys. Of course, family for supporting as well. My little brother, Zachary from Syndicate Soul System back in the day. You know what I mean? Still hooking me up with numbers of disc tracks to send records to. You know what I'm saying? So just the people that have, been around and who have been there. And the people that are truly doing it for the love. I want to say that definitely. Guys who are doing it for the love. Because, we can't do this thinking that we're all going to be like rich or be millionaires or whatever, and that was never the reason for getting involved in music. It was all about the love and the passion for reggae and dancehall, and we just want to keep that going as much as we possibly can.
The After Glow Riddim, featuring Shaggy and GC, Massacre, Bugle, Christopher Martin and Jamil, is available digitally now on 2 Hard Records. Be sure to check it out if you haven't already. Jeremy, thanks a lot.
Gibbo, thanks so much. Big up yourself.
Gibbo presents